The human experience, with our flaws, our passions, our triggers, our inspirations, and our imprints. If we could see behind everyone's story, then perhaps what we would have is deep compassion. In this podcast, I get the chance to explore these stories from some truly fascinating people in some honest and heartwarming conversations. And best of all, I get to share these discussions with you. I'm Lael Stone, and this is Humans Being. Welcome everybody to Humans Being. I'm Lael Stone. My human contemplation for this week is all about rest and all about sometimes the inner struggles we have to give ourselves rest. And this is something I've actually talked about for many years and in different forums around our relationship with self-care and resting and how vital and important it is. However, I am still finding my default is to move more towards doing than actually being, to actually give myself the time to be still, to rest, to actually just look out the window or listen to the birds, because there is still this deep inherent belief somewhere that productivity is better. And I think I'm in this next phase of my life where I don't really have to mother anymore and I don't really need to parent, even though my kids are all still living at home. Once upon a time, it was all about either parenting or it was about working. And now it's not so much about parenting. There is more opportunities for rest, and therefore there's more opportunities to just work instead. And the challenge that I have been feeling deeply is even though I've gotten much better at it, is still trying to give myself deep permission to just actually be still, to listen what my body needs in that moment, especially as I go going through perimenopause, to keep tuning in to what do I need in this moment? Do I actually need to have a nap, or do I need to go for a walk, or do I need to see a friend? Or what is it that is going to serve me? Because what served me when I was in my 30s doesn't necessarily serve me now as a 50-year-old woman. And so I'm really just fascinated at the deeper threads that are still sitting there for me around the permission to rest. So that is what I am working with at the moment. I wonder if any of that relates to anybody listening around those deeper imprints that we have around being and resting and giving ourselves what we need. Now, my beautiful guest today is a woman that I absolutely admire. Every time I listen to her, I just nod along. I am like making all the noises as you listen in the podcast of like, yep, so good. I agree. Because I think she just brings such a beautiful truth and realness and honesty to everything that she shares. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Emily Musgrove. Hello, Emily. Welcome.
Hello. It's such a privilege to be speaking with you, Lael. So thrilled to be here.
Oh, thank you. I just refer to you as Dr. M, and everyone knows exactly who I'm talking about. So when I was sharing with someone that you were coming on the podcast, I'm like, you know Dr. M? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's what you're known as now. Let me give a little intro to Emily if you haven't heard or know of her work. So Dr. Emily Musgrove has over a decade of experience as a clinical psychologist and owns and operates her own private practice in Perth. She is the beloved resident psychologist on the Imperfects podcast, where she picks standout moments from previous episodes as a springboard to share her clinical perspective and evidence-based strategies that listeners can apply to their own beautiful imperfect lives. Her new book, Unstuck, a guide to finding your way forward to the life you want to live, was released in May 2025. And Dr. M is passionate about making mental health knowledge accessible to everyone and synthesizing complex psychological theories into practical, actionable strategies that help people cultivate meaningful and fulfilling lives. And that is something that I think you do so well. I'm wondering, before we jump in, what I was just talking about then around rest, the imprints around it, is that something that you relate to? Is that something that you know in your life?
Yes, absolutely. I was having to restrain myself from jumping in as you were talking. Yes, I think that it's that striving mode that's so hard to turn off. And that's, I think so many of us In fact, it feels rare for me to notice and to know people that have been so skillful at being able to stand still and to rest and to be in that being mode. I think that's something that we all really struggle with for so many different reasons. But it's such a skill that is so vital, I think, to living well, to be able to do that.
100%. And I think as a woman particularly, we know that rest and stillness, well, for me, what I've found in my own personal experience is the stillness and the rest is where my intuition is most alive. It is where I integrate things. I can't race at the pace that I used to, definitely since I've gotten older. And I grew up around women where that's just what you do. I grew up with these really powerhouse women, and the vibe was kind of, if you're not doing 3 jobs at once, you're lazy. Yeah. And so then when I became a mother, it was just such a catastrophe because I never gave myself any self-care. I never took care of myself. I was always just doing because that's what you do as a woman. And it's been so hard to undo that imprint.
It is. It's such a reflex.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I was telling you before, Lael, that I've just come back from holidays, and it was a very restful, very restorative break. But interestingly, when I arrived home, as soon as I entered the house, it was like doing mode. I was like preparing food for the week. I was doing loads of washing. I was like complaining about the floor not being vacuumed. And I was like, how did this happen that I've crossed the threshold and the doing mode is on? It didn't need to be. It really could have been a much more gentle entryway. But it took some, actually it was my mum that called me out and she's like, what are you doing? I'm just slow down.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be so automatic or reflexive.
Yeah. And, I think the thing that really changed it for me was actually when I had a daughter, because I remember just thinking who she's going to be in the world is going to be based on me and what she's watching. And I was so aware of that pattern of just doing, because that's what the women in my family did, that I really went, I have to show her a different way of being within it, and that slowness is important and tuning into your body. And I think I've done really well because they're young adults now and they've got no problem with being slow and listening. I love that about them. Sometimes a little bit too much. I'm like, come on, we can leave a bit now. But I love that that has shifted in their narrative. I love that. But I can still see the remnants in me, which I'm really, it's still there. It's maybe, I don't know, those little edges that are still so connected to things like worth and productivity and all that kind of stuff. They're a bit sneaky how they pop up, hey?
They are. It's interesting, even just as you say that word slow and listening, in the past, I feel like it would have been slow and lazy. But that's such a nice reframing there of slow and listening. In order to listen, I have to be slow.
Yeah.
So I think it really kind of undermines that lazy part that we get so attached to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in a world where there is a lot of noise and we have so much input coming in all the time, I feel like now more than ever, my mastery is about learning to be slower. Is learning about sitting still, and I feel like I need it more than ever now. And I am seeing when I don't do that, then what other places turn up. There feels like there's just a bit more chaos, or it's like I feel like life's trying to get my attention to go, you need to actually slow down a bit. So yeah, I'll keep working on that. Thank you for your insights. I would love to start talking about something that's one of my most favorite topics, and I think something that you are so deeply passionate about, which is the topic of compassion. It's something, on most Imperfects episodes when you're talking, you come back to and talking about that dance of who we are as humans and having to learn how to find that compassion for ourselves. I think in my work and my experience as well, working with many, many people, the critic within us all, this when we're working through traumas, all those kind of things, it's just I don't believe that we can have healing unless we have compassion for ourselves and the human experience that we have. If I was to say to you, where does someone start to have compassion? Because I'm sure you've experienced this as well. When I say to people, we need to start with compassion, they're like, I don't even know what that looks like. I don't even, what does that mean? Am I meant to love myself? I'm like, you don't have to get to loving yourself yet. Let's just start with the tiniest bit of understanding, acknowledgement, that kind of stuff. What would you say if someone was like, well, how do I start having compassion?
This may seem like a backwards approach to this, but I would actually start with tuning in to what the voice is saying to start with. So that often would mean tuning into the voice of the critic. So it actually, almost like my tendency would actually be to notice and to name how the critic is showing up, what is it telling you, and then actually uncovering what the function and purpose of the critic is. And it's from that place that I'd then want to start to bring in some compassion work. So it might even be something like, can we hold this critic with a compassionate lens? So something like thanking it for showing up. So it might even be like, that's the entryway there, is rather than going down I'm going to extend an enduring sense of loving kindness towards myself. That can feel too much. But it might be just this starting point of uncovering the critic, uncovering its role, and then offering a compassion for how hard it's worked for us in so many different ways. And then we can bring on board the harder work, I think.
I love that, because I often have found that sometimes we start judging the judgment. Like
100%. Yes.
Being judgmental, and I shouldn't be judgmental, and just get in that loop, right, of judging the judgment, sitting there within it. And I love where you start within that, because it is so much about, well, where are those stories coming from, and why are they there, and are they even true? You know, what I am saying, and whose voice is there that might be connected to that. It really is the first step, isn't it? Is that acknowledgement, or the mindfulness, without using that buzzword, but the mindfulness to be able to go, what am I making this mean in these moments?
Yeah. And that we can then, it's when you tune into that you can then have some capacity for flexibility. So to be able to the analogy that I would always give is like you sitting at a dinner table, and you always sit in the same spot at this family dinner table. And so you always have the same view of that dinner table. And that's like the view of the critic. It only has one view of you. And so the challenge that we have is like, okay, we're not getting rid of the table, but let's change the position. What view kind of opens up then?
I love that. I love that. What a beautiful analogy to see it. I think everyone can relate to that. And as someone who, holds space for people's pain all day in the work that you do and listening to their stories, how do you hold compassion for yourself? Is that something that you've had to learn as well? Or how do you take care of you when you're standing in that place?
Yeah. It's absolutely fundamental in this work, and it is in many other industries as well. I will absolutely acknowledge, but it's working in the field of mental health and mental illness means that you get up close to other people's pain, and there's some really interesting research around the difference between having empathy versus compassion in the therapeutic space, for example, and the research suggests that when we can hold a compassionate space and lean into the compassion, we're actually less likely to burn out than if we're fully in an empathic mode. And that is in some ways because in compassion, we also find, we can sit with suffering, but we're also driven by an incentive and a desire to alleviate it. So there's an action orientation in the compassionate approach, as opposed to only sitting with and feeling someone else's pain. So that lens has been really important to me. I have particular practices that I do actually in the session with my clients that is both for them and for myself. So at the beginning, most of my clients would know this, but at the beginning of most sessions, depending upon who the client is, But for the most part, we will do a brief mindfulness meditation together. So it goes for about 2 or 3 minutes. And that is really a space to attune to myself, for the client to attune to themselves, and then to go from that grounded space and into the therapy. But that's just as much for me as it is for them as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I 100% relate. Whenever I do a lot of online training with people, whether it's parents or just people, and I start every single one of my sessions like that with a drop-in and connection. And I agree, it's as much for me as it is for them, because you're usually coming from one thing to the next, and then you're in this space where you're going to hold space for people, and you really need to be switched on. It's you can't. It's so important to be really attuned to what's happening. So yes, I agree with you. It's so vital, isn't it? And have you, look, I think this is what makes you very good at what you're doing. And I want to explore a little bit more of your story. But, I have always believed that if we are going to sit with people, particularly in their hard stuff, like we have to know our own story and our own triggers and our own places to be able to sit in that really neutral, compassionate space. Have you found that doing your own inner work has just allowed you to meet people in those pretty messy spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think it would be irresponsible not to do the work in this work. So I have a therapist who I see, sometimes I see her for, frequently, and sometimes it might be 6 months. I've had other therapists before her, and it has been such an important part of, why I do this work too. And so, from a very clinical lens here, it's like the notion of highlighting your blind spots.
Yeah.
So if I'm not aware of what my blind spots are, the places of reactivity, the places where I get activated, then how can I possibly be attuned to what the client is experiencing too? So if I wasn't aware of that, like maybe a client says something to me and I'm like, boom, that's triggering an anger response for me. And all of a sudden we've lost connection. The client is having this feeling of the therapist is angry at them, but that was actually all my stuff. So if I'm not attuned to that, then we have a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think I have always it sounds like you have had therapists or mentors that I've always taken my stuff to, because we're always continuously learning. And I think when you step into spaces like this, and particularly when people are bringing big traumas, or there is these big stories that people are carrying, it is so vital and important that we know where our seat is amongst all that, and the deep compassion to meet someone in those places without losing our center. And it's a deep work. Like sometimes you can just have one client, or I can do a session for a few hours with people and then come off, and I'm like, I can feel I'm a bit blown out. I need to go for a walk. I need to take some space, because it's deeply emotional work, holding space for somebody in their stories.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And I think that when you said that you can feel it when you're emotionally kind of blown out, I think it's really easy for us to miss it, and just to continue on in that doing mode. And sometimes I miss it, and sometimes I don't. Like it might be, the times that I don't might be that I'll sit in my car for a few minutes before I leave, or I'll drive with nothing on in the car and just have quiet.
Yes.
So they're the moments. Or it might be that there's a call here for something else, like what do I need?
Yeah.
But at other times it is missed, and then you just continue on an automatic pilot. And then there's a price to pay at some point.
There is, because you can absolutely have that compassion fatigue, can't you? Where you get to a point where you're like, I don't want to listen to anyone else's stories anymore. I don't want to listen to anyone else's pain. Yeah. And I know I've gone way too far if I get to that point where I'm like, I'm feeling like I don't care. And I'm like, oof, you need a break, or you need to be. It's not uncommon for me sometimes, if I've been doing big stuff, that I stand up after the session finishes and I just shake and jump and dance and just move the energy in my body. I hum a lot. Sometimes I'll voice note a good friend or someone where I just need to go, that was big. And I don't share what's going on, but I just need to even get it out to just to let it go, to give it another space. That I think that's so vital, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in 2021, you were diagnosed with early stage breast cancer, and you described it as a call to arms, to wake up, to look up and to be present. And isn't often those big life-changing moments the ones that really make us take stock of where we're at? The things that we often don't see coming, and it's something like an illness, the death of a loved one, or we get fired from a job, or something happens that we have to stop and pause and go where we're at. What did this crossroad of your life invite you into? Like what opened up for you when that happened?
There were so many different moments that I could reflect on there. In some ways, it was really just opening up to the simplicity and the beauty of those small moments. Like I have really vivid memories, like in the midst of, there's a period of time where you don't know what the extent of the diagnosis is. And so you're sitting in this place of deep uncertainty, and that is ridden with fear. And I just have this vivid memory of the sky being so piercingly blue. And maybe there's part of this as a kind of a trauma memory, maybe, but that there was something so vivid about the color. I was like, how is this possible that this sky could be so blue? And that it was like those sorts of moments that I was like, whoa, we're in this world that I so dearly want to like continue to live in. And it was kind of like showcasing that part. In a broader sense, there were two main things. The first is like, yes, this is a call to arms. Like, how do I want to live? How am I going to show up? What's deeply important to me? And a reattunement, I guess, with my values. But also on the other hand, and maybe this goes hand in hand, was the fact that you can move along. Sometimes you can be very lucky and move along in life and nothing really significant or traumatic happens. And we can live in like a delusion that nothing bad will happen. And I think what can happen sometimes in that space is that we can disconnect from creating something meaningful for ourselves, because we can just put it off to another time, or we can say, I'll be fine, I'll do it when this happens. But when there is this change in life that exposes you to a grief, but it also exposes you to the finite nature of living, I think that can really change your perspective on the fact that we don't know how long we have to live. And so it's like, okay, so if I don't know, then what am I going to do with this time I am here for? So that was probably the most significant part, I think.
Yeah. And your children would have been really little at that time too. That must have been, I can imagine the waves of fear or, that must have surfaced of trying to keep yourself anchored amongst all those thoughts that race through our heads.
Yeah. Oh, that was, that to me, and everyone's experience will be different, I'm sure, but that to me was the most difficult part of being sick. My daughter was about 18 months old and my son was about 4, I think. And I remember kind of bargaining with myself in my head, and I was like, well, if I could, if I can get to this age, or if we can get to this age, is that it's like you start bargaining with some sort of higher power that like, just let me get to here. And that the longer you have, the bigger, I probably won't go down this track, but being a psychologist, I'm so acutely aware of the impact of being a parent on a child. And in some ways, it would have been helpful not to know. In some ways, let me start again. there are times when being exposed to this work can feel really hard to hold when you have little people, because you know what this can look like when they get older, or you know the imprint that this forms. And that was really hard. That was really hard. But they're also the joy of my life too. Yeah.
I really hear you on that. And I think it's that kind of thing. I used to say this when I worked in birth for a long time. I know too much now to not unsee it, but also know the impact of what it can have, whether that is, I know, birthing mother, a family, a baby, and then, working in spaces where there was trauma and you understand the impact it has. It, too much on some level to ignore it. But then you also see the enormity of where it may unfold. And that is really scary. I'm my own journey as well of having traumatic experiences or seeing things happen and knowing or listening to so many people's stories where you know where that can end up. And, on some level it sounds like that allowed you to have a motivation, whether it was to move more to health and all those kind of things, of, so that it didn't have to happen. But I can imagine that there was probably some pretty big spaces where, it was pretty scary.
Yeah, it was. It was truly the most terrifying time of my life, and I was so incredibly fortunate that I found it when I did. And I know not everyone is as fortunate as that. And I wish it hadn't happened to me. I wish that I didn't have to hold and carry the fear that it may return, but it also provides another call here that this is the one life we get, and make the best of it. Yeah.
And sometimes they are the gifts in experiences like that, aren't they? Especially we see that sometimes with death, when we're looking at, I don't know, someone that we love who passes on, or when we have a scare ourselves. I think sometimes it shows us the contrast about where we're not living what we deeply want and desire. It's like sometimes I feel like we need that shake. We don't need the shake up, but sometimes that is the gift of it to help us go, what kind of life do you want to live?
Yeah.
Where are you at within it?
Yeah. Like, how do you want to show up?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's big. I mean, it'd be really awesome if we didn't have to have big experiences like that. But sometimes we don't listen, right? Sometimes we're just, we're going along in life doing our things, which kind of brings me to your beautiful book called Unstuck. I love that title. And I mean, to me, what that speaks about really is how we do move through stuff or stories or belief systems or whatever that we're so conditioned to be in. And sometimes life makes us move by these big kind of, crisis of confidence that happens, or that dark night of the soul thing that goes on that makes us move. But I have found in my work, and I'm sure you're very similar too, that for some people, even though they don't like where they are, it works for them on some level, which I know sounds very blunt, but the way I sometimes see it is that the fear of actually moving out of what they know, even though they don't like it, feels so much bigger. So staying stuck actually works for them.
Yes.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit about, your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. And it's, in some ways it's quite complex, but on the other hand, it's relatively simple. But the way that I would often think about it is this idea that we are drawn to what's familiar because familiarity makes us feel safe, even if what is familiar is really harmful. So, as humans, we love predictability, we love structure, and we love familiarity. So change actually will then bring about discomfort. So change always brings discomfort, and no one likes discomfort. Like a lot of the work that I do with clients is unpacking, okay, what is keeping you here? And there may be, in therapy talk, we would say secondary gains. So there may be a secondary gain from not changing. And that secondary gain could look like, hypothetically, I get more care if I'm unwell. This is just one example, but if I am unwell, then I receive the care and love of my partner. And there is a risk then that if I'm well, what happens to the love and the care and attention that I might receive? Now, I'm not saying that this is intentional. Often it's very unconscious. But we want to uncover it. We want to unpack, is there another gain that you're unintentionally experiencing from staying in this same place? It's difficult work, and I think it requires a lot of compassion in that space to really kind of shining a mirror on what this experience is facilitating in your environment.
Yeah. I absolutely, agree with what you're saying, and it is often unconscious because I often say we're always coming from protection. We're always trying to keep ourselves safe. That's our fundamental state. Yet sometimes the beliefs that we have or what we think is true actually isn't, and that's what keeps us there. I remember so clearly many years ago when I had pretty intense PTSD, and then I had to heal from that, from my third birth experience. And then, I had anxiety, and I was living in a place where I didn't like it. It was confronting, and it's very debilitating. Anybody knows this with anxiety. It feels so debilitating. And I was working with someone at the time, and we were doing this bit of exercise. She said to me, what would it mean if you actually got to put your anxiety down and then you never had it anymore? And, part of me that wants to go, well, I'd be great and it'd be amazing and I would feel excellent. And she was like, just pause. What does it feel? She said, if I said you could put it down now, do you want to put it down? And I was like, no. She's like, you don't want to put it down? And she's like, why?
Yeah.
And I said, because if I put it down, then nothing's going to be wrong with me. And then I'll have no excuse not to step out in the world and do what I need to do in the world.
Yeah.
And she's like, and what's going to happen then? And I'm like, well, then if I'm out in the world, then more people can judge me, and then I don't want to be judged. So it's just easier just to stay here. And that was like revolutionary for me in the shift in my life, because I realized not only was I judging my anxiety as bad as wrong, but I was like, oh, mate, it's working for me at the moment. No, I'm not saying it's as easy as putting your anxiety down for anyone who has anxiety. It's really big. I so appreciate and understand how debilitating it can be. But when I began to see the story that was connected to it, that's when I was able to really work with it. I was able to see what the fear was sitting over the other side, how it was serving me to stay in those places. And it's something I see a lot with women I work with, particularly about playing small, about, not taking that risk, trying the new thing, or staying in relationships that don't serve them, because the belief system over the other side is, am I going to be judged? Will I be okay? What will people think? All of those patterns and conditionings that we carry.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest examples of like an attachment to the sameness, staying the same, would be around people pleasing and self-sacrifice. So we can see in that space that there is a secondary gain. And again, this is not a conscious choice necessarily. There is a secondary gain to me pleasing you. And the pleasing means that I feel loved, or I feel validated, or I feel valued. So as long as I meet the needs of other people, I will be valuable. So if I stop meeting those needs, this is going to feel really risky. And so there we see like the interplay of that gain that I get from staying the same. But it's obviously coming at a huge cost. And that's why people will find themselves in therapy, is that the secondary gain is actually not enough anymore.
Yeah. And that is so weird, isn't it? It feels too uncomfortable to play that way. And we keep seeing that turn up in our lives, where particularly if you've had that really strong good girl imprint, so many women have, because when we look at how we were raised and how we were taught to be, and it's all about keeping everyone else happy, to give that up, even though they kind of want to, it just feels so terrifying, because that fundamental need, which, I'm sure you see, so much of our pain or our stories or belief systems comes back to the enoughness. Am I enough? Am I lovable? All those kind of things, which again, our society has done a great job of telling us, no, you're not lovable or you're not enough unless you look a certain way or earn a certain amount of money or achieve in some way. And then bless our beautiful parents who were doing the best they could, but love was very conditional for a lot of people. So again, it just gets reinforced. I think we can see why it's so understandable why so many people carry that story. Of needing to have everybody's approval, outsource for love, which kind of comes back to that piece again around the beautiful compassion and loving ourselves enough to know that actually, that is one of the biggest steps to being able to putting that story down, is that I am lovable even if you don't approve of me.
Yes.
I am lovable even if you don't like the boundary I'm setting. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to say in practice, isn't it? But my goodness, how hard is it to live?
It's tremendously hard. Yeah. And it requires, being able to feel a sense of worth that is there just because I'm alive, for a start.
Yeah.
But also one of the hardest things I think that comes with changing that pattern is being able to tolerate other people's emotions.
Yes.
So being able to tolerate people's disappointment or anger and to know that I'm okay even in the face of that.
Yeah. And that's so huge, isn't it? Because we are, as humans, I feel, so uncomfortable in the uncomfortable. And we are quick to Band-Aid. We're quick to make a fix. I mean, we see this in parenting all the time where, it is so uncomfortable being around our child's upset. We give in to what they want, or we become even bigger and power over it to shut it down. But I often say in the parenting space, our job is to learn to be comfortable in the uncomfortable and to know that when your child's having some feelings, that our job is to create a safe container for them to process and let it go. That is so tricky when we've never actually often have a lived experience of that ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you find that that good girl element or that places of keeping everybody else happy, has that been a pattern or a theme in your life?
I'm laughing. Yes, it has. I've said this to someone before that this is my life's work is is stepping out of that, and that's part of why I've been in therapy. And I think there was some stat the other day about people who are self-aware, and that something like 90% of us say we're self-aware, but something like only 8% are. So I say this not knowing if I really am self-aware, but I do notice where and when the self-sacrifice kind of schema or people-pleasing pattern will show up. And it is something that some days I can do really well with, and at other times it's more of a struggle. But yes, it is something that I will probably be my life's work, I think. And I'm okay with that because I know it's there.
Yeah. I know this is a bit cliche and people talk about this as you age, but I reckon the older we get as women, and I think there's something about perimenopause and menopause, it really helps with that. So many women who are in this age and stage are like, I just do not give a shit anymore. But they are just like, here it is. And I think maybe it's the drop in estrogen where we don't give as much. I'm just like, I don't take care of anyone. More that something shifts, and I kind of love that. I was laughing.
That's very empowering.
Yeah, I met this guy the other day who was like maybe a 34-year-old man, and he was saying, the scariest group of people there are? And I'm like, what? And he goes, it's like a group of 56-year-old women who do not give a shit anymore. And he goes, they terrify me because they just say it how it is. And I was laughing so much. I was like, firstly, I love that you can see that. And he's like, oh yeah, like my mum's and her friends. I'm like, oh my gosh. it's like they don't care anymore. The filter's been dropped of I have to keep you happy and pleased. And I'm like, I kind of love, of all the things that we navigate and go through, that maybe that is one of the beautiful gifts.
Yeah.
We get to put that story down.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say that because obviously in the current world, there's so much information about perimenopause and menopause, which is so wonderful. But my fear is that if we blame changes in our personality on this thing, that it actually takes away from a truthfulness that might be here.
Yes.
And so I think in some ways, it feels important to me that we declutter and, yes, give validation and compassion to genuine hormonal physical changes that are occurring, and also uncover what is this voice arising from. And so this anger is pointing to something that is genuine. We don't want to, I think, minimize that as just a hormonal change.
Yeah.
That's I could go on about that. But
I feel like, I really agree with you. I feel like having going through perimenopause and having lots of hot flushes and stuff, I kept looking at I'm burning away the stuff that doesn't serve me anymore. That's how I was choosing to look at it. I was getting hot and I'm burning the dross away, right? I'm burning the stuff, and I could feel it in me because I was such a beautiful people pleaser. I've been a good girl most of my life. I mean, it's definitely, I've had to learn through different things to set those boundaries, but I feel like it's really helped me move a next part of that, whether that's just through physical changes, but it's not even that. It's a deeper questioning of who I am, who I want to be, how I want to live this next part of my life. And it feels powerful. It feels really powerful because it feels like we are getting one of those moments again that sometimes we only get when crisis happens, where we're asking ourselves, who am I? And who do I want to be? And where do I want to sit within this space of my life? And I am absolutely seeing the incredible power within it. It excites me on some level of
it is exciting.
This next phase. Yeah. It's big. And I feel like, in our society for a long time, I think middle-aged women have become very invisible. We worship the maiden in our society and yet this is, I think, where women are really finding and starting to step into their power in a whole new way.
Yeah, and I think that when it's reframed as this, particularly if you're not deep in the trenches of caregiving for infants, for example, is that now there is this, very much this midlife call. How do I want to live now? Yes. I may have done all the things, I've ticked off those things, but how am I going to show up now? Because I potentially have a whole nother half of my life to go.
Yes.
And this is about making it, really making it count.
Yeah. And it's exciting. I'm in this stage of my life where I have 3 adult kids. They all still live at home at the moment, so it's a bit like living in a share house, but a bit cleaner than a share house. But, they're all about to go again. They've come and gone. They've done all that kind of stuff, but they're about to all go traveling again and things are going to change. And it really is dawning on me, I think, and my husband, where we're like, whoa, we're in the next stage now. Yeah. We are in this third marriage. We're in this third stage of life where, we've done the kind of meeting and hooking up and trying to figure out who we are. And then you do the heavy lifting of raising kids and servitude. And now you've got this next phase where it feels like you can just I'm just getting started. I'm like, this is exciting because it's about where we are. And that I really feel passionate about the excitement of what that can be. Because we're dropping up a lot of those old ideas of the way we should look or keeping people happy or what success is, to actually be like, what is my greatest life in front of me?
Yeah. I have to say, Lael, that I think it was yesterday maybe, or I'm not sure what day it was, you posted you at a silent disco.
Yeah.
And that's the greatest example of that. I could feel the joy coming through that video. I was like, this is life. Here I am experiencing this joyfulness. Yeah.
And it was so freeing because I didn't care what I looked like. I didn't care how bad I was dancing. I was singing at the top of my lungs. And there was a freedom that I have never felt before. Because I just truly didn't give a shit what anyone thought of me. And and I feel a bit sad that it's taken me to 50 to get to a point where I'm like, this is it. But it also makes sense why it has been the other way, right? Up until this point.
Yeah.
But I feel like, there could be a really unhinged, crazy Lael.
She's being unleashed. I think everyone needs to see it. It's excellent.
Yeah. It's really exciting. And I mean, I think back to younger versions of me that maybe if I said this to them, they wouldn't be ready to hear it. But I, and again, I trust the process that we have to go through to get to those places. But my goodness, I just feel like I want to stand in a place to say, this can be so exciting, this next stage that we get to. It's amazing. And a lot of that's got to do with, again, our perception and what we think and believe and all those kind of things. But I feel like I want to stand in a different place to say that there is possibility that sits there that can be magnificent.
Absolutely.
So, my work, I talk a lot about those imprints that we received as, children and all those kind of things, which, can impact and affect who we are. For you, if you were to think about your childhood and the way you were raised, what are two of the imprints that have really been so powerful and positive for you that you feel have impacted your journey?
I have such fond memories of my childhood. I really do. My parents are actually visiting Perth at the moment. They live in Melbourne. And it's been such a reminder of the imprint around kindness and generosity as probably two very big values. And that kind of the notion of having a generous view of the world has been an enormous imprint. And that when we have a generous view, we can also be really kind. And that kindness, in my mind, will inevitably come back to you. And I think they are the greatest gifts my parents gave me, was a kindness, and being able to witness how they treat other people in particular, how they treat all walks of life really. And we just had, from that basis, we just had a really fun time. And so there's that major imprint, and the other one was humor, which is interesting because, like, if you were to look at my family, I'm the least funny in my family, and I work in a very serious profession. But there was always laughter, there was always humor, and it's one of my fondest memories is being in hysterics. They were the most, I think those two kind of parts there were the most important imprints for me.
I love that. What a gift to receive that, because the opposite of that, which I, have seen many times in people, their sharing was judgment, was just judgment around everything, whether it was other people, whether it was around themselves as a human. It was, that the opposite of that is that mood of kindness and generosity. I love that. How blessed,
Oh, I know. I know. And it's interesting too, and I don't mean to say this in a, I don't know what the word would be, humble bragging way. But I'm fairly certain as a result of those imprints, I actually don't have a very strong inner critic. And maybe that's part of the work that I do as well. And particularly moving into this compassionate lens, that I have always found it easier to be kind to myself. And I'm sure that's because I experienced an unconditional kindness.
Yeah. Oh, I would 100% agree. I mean, I think the equivalent for me is I grew up with an amazing imprint from my mum, which was always asking why, what is happening pain here? What does that mean for you? What do you make? Like even from like a 7 or 8 year old, I remember like doing self-inquiry, going, why are my friends behaving that way? And why am I behaving that? Like, I remember the default has always been my whole life, that deep inquiry of why, and what are my feelings here? And that's always been my default, instead of you're wrong or you're treating me badly, is like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Which I think those imprints can be so powerful, can't they? When they, when you take a moment and step back and think about what your family modeled to you. I mean, again, we know that there's some really painful ones that people have, but those ones of humor and kindness and generosity, I mean, that is just so divine. And I think, how beautiful that has been imprinted to you, to be able then for you to take that out into the world in the work that you do as an example of that. I just see those beautiful ripple effects of what that does for the people you work with.
I very much hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. And would you say, is there any imprints that you've taken on board from your family that you're like, that one needs a bit of work, or there's something happening again? It's all perception, right? So it may not even be what was true, but it's what we make it mean. Is there anything that like that's been one that I've had to work with?
Yeah. Look, I think, obviously, I'm not sure if you've heard of the term like the near and far enemy of certain values, and it's Brene Brown has actually talks about it in her most recent book, but it's based also on Buddhist principles. So, like, for example, if I have a value of kindness, the far enemy might be something like, this is not the right one, but let's just say for the purpose of this, being mean, being selfish, perhaps something like that. That's the far enemy. It's the opposite of the value of kindness. But a near enemy would be something like self-sacrifice.
Yes.
So that's the challenge for me in there, is that there is a great capacity for me to be too kind to people, and to offer them too much of a generous interpretation, and to self-sacrifice in view of that. And so that's kind of the thing that I need to work on. But it's interesting because you could say that has come from my family of origin, but I also think it's part of temperament. So, I have two brothers, and they're not exactly the same as me. They don't struggle with, people pleasing in the way that I would necessarily. So I think there's almost like a biological imprint there.
Do you reckon that?
As well as this environmental kind of modeling. Yeah.
Yeah. What number are you in the siblings? Like, where do you come?
The first. Yeah. That's
and probably not unusual. As well, is just like, well, I'll take care of everybody because that's often what we do. So
exactly
in those places. Yeah, isn't that fascinating when you look at a family and you're raised in this environment? Yet I agree with you, the temperament, who we are as people, the order we were born in, about what we do take on and what we don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I understand. I have two brothers, and one of my, and that for me is probably very similar. Of it has been people pleasing, and that exactly the same. Like really not knowing where my boundaries are and saying yes, all that kind of stuff. And yet one of my brothers is like, he is very clear, and he's just like, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah,
and I'm like, whoa,
how?
It's really amazing. I mean, I see that even in my own three children. Just you raise them, as consciously as you can in the same way, yet they all have their own stories and imprints that they carry forward. And it's just, it's amazing, isn't it? It's still such a beautiful, as much as we try and put labels and theories and stuff, it's such a beautiful mystery sometimes too, isn't it? Just when we look at the family unit, who we are and what we make the world mean.
Absolutely.
Beautiful mystery. To finish off, if you think about your beautiful kiddos, and in 20 years' time, if I was to sit down with them and say, what are the imprints, that really landed with you from your upbringing, what do you hope that they will say?
Oh, I would say the same as what I had. I know that and also, not that my parents didn't do this, but this is a really important thing, is to be able to stand in your worth.
Yeah.
And that we can be kind and generous, and also know when someone's crossed a boundary.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't have any fear for my daughter. I think she's very good at doing that. She's very different to how I was as a child. And that's personality. She was born that way. I just so deeply hope that when I leave this earth, that they felt, obviously that they felt so deeply loved, but also that they could take the value of kindness and being curious about people as something to cherish, really.
Yeah. I love that. That's really beautiful. And, my invitation always is that what we want for our children, like, are we living that? Are we the example of that? Because that's what they're watching. They're constantly seeing and taking that on board. And that, for a lot of people, that is often the invitation to do the work, isn't it? When we think about what are our kids taking on board, what are they seeing, what are they witnessing? I think that is often what sometimes gets parents particularly to move, when they're thinking about what is it that their children are taking on board.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big one. It's a big motivator. Hey. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. I often think about that. My kids have been, without doubt, the place where I've had to lean in the hardest, because parenting is just such a, such a huge job. But when I've had to really do the work and look at my story has been because I don't want you to carry that forward. Like, this is going to end here, and this is where I want you to have a life where you feel free to be who you need to be. And that has taken a lot of getting real and honest to shift the pieces that I've needed to, and that's, it's uncomfortable. Again, comes back to the uncomfortable, isn't it? It's uncomfortable work, but I don't think you will ever regret doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think probably my clients would be annoyed if I say this, but if we're uncomfortable, we're in the right place.
Yes.
I think it feels important. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's the part of leaning in, isn't it? Which we all get very good at turning away or leaning out. And I think our culture and society has supported that for a really long time. It's very easy to blame everybody else and point the finger, and yet I just think it takes enormous courage to lean in or to stand in the uncomfortableness. But I really believe it's always worth it, because who we get to reveal underneath all that, whether it's a coming home closer to ourselves, whether it's just the spaces where we get to heal something that we no longer need to carry. For me, it's just one of the greatest gifts we can give our children is to do our work and know our story.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. I feel like all we've done is probably agree with each other. But that's beautiful. What would you like people to know about what you have going on, whether it's your book or your work, or what would you like people to know?
Well, yes, I have written and published a book, Unstuck, and it's very much my approach to how I would work in therapy. I have that. I also have a practice where obviously I see individuals. But in 2026, I'm also hopefully, if I get my work done at some point in time, I'm not sure where, I am going to launch an online community. Which I'm really excited about, and it's really based upon offering a very hopefully I hope a safe space where people can learn and be curious and offer themselves some compassion. So that will unfold hopefully next year, and I can't wait to talk more to people.
I love that, because so much power comes from listening to other people's stories and watching them have their realizations and movements. Like, it's so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
What can happen when we do that? Oh, that will be such a gift to the world. And lucky people to be part of that. That's so exciting. That's so exciting. I love that you said, when I get the rest of my work done, I'll do that.
Yeah, I know. I actually generally don't know when I'm going to do it, but you'll know when I do. Yeah.
I love that. I have faith. It's just, we'll just shove that into, we'll just we'll do this when the time is there. And right. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Em, for your time and
thank you
just
so
the beautiful
much.
wisdom that you share with the world. Like, I just love that there is a platform that people get to hear from you, and also that you bring these beautiful concepts down into a place where people can connect with them, make sense of them, and then hopefully, work with it to shift and transform their lives. So thank you on behalf of the world for the beautiful work that you do.
No, thank you so much, Lael. It's just such a treat to be here.
Thanks for being here, everybody, listening to Humans Being. For me, I usually do a bit of a wrap up about these takeaways, but I just feel like, we speak a very similar language, just of what I think we hold for people and what is possible with compassion and with leaning into our stories and to learning to get comfortable in the uncomfortable. For me, that is the takeaway from just our chat now, of that invitation to keep being brave enough to lean in, because the power of what can come from that is always amazing. And hopefully we do it without all the tricky things that pop up in our lives, but hopefully we have those quiet moments of stillness where we can listen and we can lean in and do the work. Thank you for being here, everyone. Thanks, Em. That was such a beautiful episode, just hearing Emily's wisdom and insight. I just love how clearly she articulates something that so many of us experience. She has such a beautiful way of bringing these themes together that helps us to understand. I think I really liked how she just touched on the relief of naming what's actually happening in our lives. When we can acknowledge it and actually speak it, it begins to often lessen its grip on us. I think I also really enjoyed when we talk about people pleasing, that it isn't just about being nice. It's often a survival strategy for many people. When we're seeking validation, love, worthiness through meeting others' needs, there's often some secondary gains within that, these unconscious payoffs we get from staying the same, even when it hurts, but also keeping ourselves safe in different dynamics that we've created in order to believe that we're going to be okay. So, there's some big themes in here for a lot of people. And I know that many, many people I've worked with over the years experience this need to have people like them, to keep it all nice, and how challenging it can be to shift those patterns. So I hope that in this episode, you have got a few little tips. I love what Emily breaks down so clearly around, who we are as humans and why we do what we do, and gives us a few little clues as to how we can shift and change those patterns and stories so we can live the life that we want to live.
Thanks for sharing this time with me. You can find my book, Own Your Story, at bookshops or listen to the audiobook on Audible. I even read it myself. You can stay connected with Humans Being on Instagram, Facebook or YouTube. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment, question or contemplation. And visit my website laelstone.com.au, where you'll find heaps of great resources and courses for you to explore. This podcast is produced by Nigel Carboon, recorded by the crew at We Make Online Videos, and our original music is created by Josh Reed. Humans Being is produced on the lands of the Bunurong and Wadawurrung people. We pay respect to their unique and diverse cultures and to elders past, present and future. Until next time, stay connected and don't forget to be human.